Guys, back at Wok Wednesdays, I've been reading some of the comments and you guys have been, a few of you guys are saying that I've been pointing too much at the camera, so I'm going to keep my hands behind my back so I don't point at you too much. Anyway, welcome back to Wok Wednesdays. This week, thanks to Neff, our brilliant friends Neff, we are going to do some steamed recipes. It's a steamed kimchi pork bao for this week's Wok Wednesday. I'm going to start with the bao dough, get this out of the way, and we're going to actually pop it into the Neff steam oven, and it's got a great bread proving function, so it just speeds up the prove. It's got the perfect conditions. And if you don't have that, you can sit it out, let it rest and prove for about an hour to an hour and a half. The steam oven, which does speed it up, does it in about 30 minutes. I've got my bread, or my flour here, which is a medium gluten wheat flour, a Chinese flour, very similar to plain flour. It's just milled to a slightly finer grain. Now this recipe is very similar to the recipe I've got in my book Hong Kong Diner, but without the milk, because we're going for the bao dough to be vegan friendly if you were to make it like this. Just take out the milk, replace it with a bit more warm water. Now I've got some yeast here, so that's fast action or instant dried yeast, some baking powder and sugar to feed that yeast, but also to give it that nice sweet flavour. And then warm water, and the water needs to be warm to the touch. So if you feel that, you know, when you dip your finger in, it doesn't really give you any warmth at all, then it's definitely too cold. You know, you want that to react with the yeast nicely. So I'm going to add a good amount, about half the amount of water first. And what you're looking for is a nice, slightly on the wet side dough to get a smooth finish on your bao dough. I'm using a spoon for now, but in a second, once I put a bit more water into it, I'll get my hands in so I can feel how wet the actual dough is. And like a lot of these pastries that you see me making, you want to get to a nice sort of Play-Doh consistency. I'll need a little bit of oil in this as well, but I'll put the oil in. You can use it, put it in with the water, but I'll do this. I'll add the oil once I've got the dough to the right texture. So you just want enough water to pick up all the excess flour around the edge of the bowl. Once you've got to that point, then take it out. I'm going to start to knead this in a second, and as you can see, it's slightly on the wet side. Just a little bit of oil over the top, and then you're going to start to knead that. So push and roll, push and roll. You want to try not to have too much of the dough on your fingertips and use your palms more. That oil just helps to make sure the dough doesn't stick to you too much. If you feel like you need just a little drop more, that's fine too. As I say, we're going to steam this in my steam oven today on full steam, but if you don't have access to a steam oven, you can do this, you know, the traditional way on a steam basket. And there's loads of alternative ways of steaming. You can check out our video on alternative steam methods, and that will show you all the different ways you can steam at home. After sort of 2 to 3 minutes, you should have a nice smooth ball of dough. And if you want to check whether it's smooth enough, I mean, it'll look smooth already, just take your thumbs and push into it. And if there's no sort of grains when you press into it, then that's just right. So just roll that into a nice sort of ball of dough. Pop that back into your bowl. And I would suggest covering it in a bit of oil so it doesn't dry out too much. And then I'm going to cover that with either a wet tea towel or some cling film. Now I'm going to pop this into the steam oven on a proving function. So it takes 30 minutes in the steam oven because it lets just enough steam into the system, and it keeps it at around sort of 35 to 40 degrees C. Now, if you don't have that, the traditional way would just be to leave it somewhere warm, and over about an hour to an hour and a half, it should double in size. I'm going for a Korean filling in my bao today. So it's a mixture of kimchi and spices and chili, garlic. And I've got some pork neck steaks. You can use pork neck, pork shoulder steaks. Anything with a little bit of marbling in works really well. I've got some ginger and garlic. Just want to peel that, finely chop. This can be quite rough and ready. And you've got loads of time whilst that dough is rising, so it's not going to take long to make this filling, but you do want the filling to sort of cool down as much as possible before you start putting it into your bao. Otherwise, the moisture from the filling will just ruin the bao pastry. You don't have to follow this filling to the T, you know, you can switch and change and do what you want, but the ginger, garlic, spring onion as a base always works well. I'm going to lightly fry some of this spring onion and then along with the ginger and garlic, and then I'll use the rest just to pop in at the end so it keeps its colour. So the whites and most of that green along with the ginger and garlic. And then I've got some kimchi. That's just shop bought kimchi. I'm going to finely chop this as well. And this will add a nice bit of texture, but also that sort of tart flavour, that sourness of the kimchi. That will work with the sweet and chili sauce. Everything for your bao nice and finely chopped. The pork, I'll go for slightly bigger sort of chunks or dices of pork, so you get a nice bite. So I don't want to waste all the goodness in there. So I'm going to actually put all my sauces and mix them up into the kimchi juice together. About a tablespoon of light soy for the saltiness. About half a tablespoon of gochujang, that Korean chili paste. That's got some sweetness in there as well. And then similar amount of dark soy. That'll change the colour of the filling and really deepen that red colour. About half a teaspoon of Korean chili flakes and similar amount of sesame oil. That mix. It doesn't look like a lot of liquid, and it isn't, but what you want is just enough sort of sauce to wrap around the meat on the wok clock just after the meat goes in. So all I have to do now is slice the meat and then I'll get wokking. I've got some mung bean vermicelli here as well, and this is really classic sort of to Korean style to sort of add this to your filling. Just roughly chop that up. You can use any sort of glass noodles for this, so sweet potato noodles work well as well, and it just kind of fills the gap between the meat. Just pop that anywhere on the plate after your ginger and garlic and spring onion. So my pork, as I said, I want good size dices, not too small because I want the texture of the pork to be there. And this is pork neck, which you don't always get. So very similar to pork shoulder steaks. So this is a really quick stir fry, nothing complicated. I've got my wok clock of ingredients set up. Oil in, your ginger, garlic, and your spring onion can pretty much all go in together. Just give that a stir around. All on a nice high heat. Add a little bit more oil to sear that pork. Sear that nicely. Bring that ginger and garlic and spring onion over the top so it doesn't burn. And that's searing nicely, so I've got my my vermicelli and my kimchi next. That kimchi is already going to work with that base flavour, give that nice spice, slight sourness, and then my sauce. Just make sure your wok gets a really high heat before you add your sauce. Your wok's really nice and smoking hot. Your sauce can go in. Smells delicious. Once your sauce goes in, you do want it to start to caramelize a little bit around the edge of the meat. So just let that come to a vigorous boil, and then every sort of 10, 15 seconds, give it a little fold through, a little stir through. Let the sugars start to interact with the wok. Then let that bubble up again. So once your pork looks more separate and there's no sort of sauce sitting on the bottom of the wok, it's all wrapped around the pork, then that stir-fry filling is ready. So you can switch that off, get that last bit of spring onion in there, mix that round, and then if you want to cool it slightly quicker, then just put it out on a flat plate before you put it into a mixing bowl. Just let that cool. Once it's fully cooled, cover it, pop it in the fridge, and it'll help you even more. My dough's had a good amount of time to prove, and it should be nice and light and airy. You can see the air underneath. I'm just showing you that there. Just going to dust the surface with a little flour. It's definitely on the wet side, this dough. A little bit of dusting flour won't hurt. And then I'm going to start to roll that out, and we're going to shape your bao now. Right, so I'm going to just show you sort of 3 or 4. You want to pick out sort of handfuls of dough for your bao shapes. Now I'm going to actually use that extra dough for our membership, our paid membership, just for one of the quick tutorials of all the lots of different things you can do with folding different bao shapes. And if you guys are interested in seeing different ways to fold your bao, then check out the paid membership, and there's a little video there. Now I'm shaping my bao doughs into balls here, and you can see that movement. This is what I like to call pinchy, pinchy, twisty, twisty, which you might have seen in some of the other bao videos that I've done, and that's just sort of pushing in and pinching and twisting it back together, and pushing into the dough and twisting it back together. So push in with your thumb and pinch and twist. And that creates a nice ball of dough. If you struggle with that pinchy, pinchy, twisty, twisty, then you can just get it into a ball by just rolling it in the palm of your hands. And then I've got a little bit more flour just to dust the surface, and I'm going to start to open this dough up. Now the traditional way of rolling your dumplings would be, or baos, would be to sort of twist it. It's kind of like the tummy and the head. So twist, and this is the sort of the wheel is my dough, and my spokes of my wheel are my middle finger and thumb. And then you just use your index finger to twist that round like so. Whilst you're doing that, your right hand uses the rolling pin and just opens that dough up. If you sort of don't fancy that traditional way and you'd rather just roll it, that's also fine. Just when you roll it once, turn it a little bit, roll it again, turn it a little bit, and just keep doing that, and you'll get a rough circle. You don't want to go too thin with the bao dough because you want that sort of fluffy texture. You can even just sort of shape it round a little bit more with your thumb and finger like that. Now when you're filling your dough, you want to get about a tablespoon of mix into each bao. Now the easiest way to do this without any overly technical explanation is just to pull up the sides like so, and then just bring the centers together and just keep pinching into the center of your bao. Once you've got that all sort of squeezed together, just push that down and turn it over, and then shape it into a nice round ball. Nice simple way to fold your bao. So once you've got these lovely little snowballs of bao, you just want to pop them onto either a bit of greaseproof, or of course if you've got a nice school wok steam mat, and that can go straight on there. Traditionally, you could of course put it into a steam basket on top of your wok, or any other alternative steaming method, but I've got my Neff steam oven. I'm going to put it on a full steam function for about 8 minutes. Now you can see how smooth it is from that pinchy, pinchy, twisty, twisty, or those nice smooth balls of dough. And it should be nice and fluffy inside. Look at that. And the colour of that kimchi filling is fantastic. Time to try it. What a great snack. I suggest when you're making this, make a big batch of them, steam them all, and then you can freeze them, and then just re-steam them for about 4 or 5 minutes out of the freezer. And you can have these in your freezer to go all the time. Guys, this is quite specialist, but actually making the dough is quite simple. And it's just the waiting time of it allowing it to rise. Of course, if you've got a steam oven like this, speeds it up a little bit more. Thanks again to Neff. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like.